A young nurse saves billionaire's pregnant wife mid-flight, but her request made the billionaire cry. It was a cold Monday morning when Stella Griffin boarded a transatlantic flight back to Texas, unaware of the danger that was lying ahead, an event that will alter her entire life forever. The terminal was a blur of movement. Families saying goodbye, solo travelers with headphones in, and rolling luggage clattering across the tile floor. Stella stepped onto the plane and found her seat in economy, row 27A. She slid into the window seat, tucked her bag beneath the chair, and pulled out a worn notebook with notes scribbled in black ink. Her hospital badge, Stella Griffin, RN, was clipped to the front. This was her routine: review notes, sleep a little, drink ginger ale, get home, go back to work. In first class, a different kind of arrival was unfolding. Kate Fox, radiant and visibly pregnant, stepped into the cabin with the slow, deliberate grace of someone in their third trimester. She was tall, elegant, but clearly uncomfortable, rubbing her lower back as she walked. Her husband, Lucas Fox, walked beside her, carrying their bags. He was dressed simply: dark jeans, sneakers, a navy jacket. There was no entourage, no fuss. If you didn't recognize him, you'd never guess he was a billionaire. The plane ascended smoothly. The seatbelt signs turned off. The attendants brought drinks, and the hum of conversation filled the cabin. Stella leaned against the window, watching the clouds drift by, already feeling her body relax. She didn't know that just a few rows away, a life-or-death situation was quietly brewing. 2 hours into the flight, it happened. First, a soft thud, then a gasping sound. A woman's voice rang out, "Help! She can't breathe." In first class, Kate Fox was slumped forward in her seat, one hand clutched to her chest. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Her skin had gone pale, almost gray. Sweat beaded along her hairline. Lucas was at her side in an instant. "Kate, look at me. Stay with me. Breathe." Flight attendants rushed over. The panic escalated fast. A glass spilled. A tray hit the ground. Kate's head lolled backward slightly. "We need medical help," one of the flight attendants shouted. "Is there a doctor on board?" Stella's head snapped up. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her badge and notebook, unbuckled her seatbelt, and started walking down the aisle toward first class. Passengers turned to look. Some moved out of her way. Others stared in confusion. "I'm a nurse," she said, holding up her badge. "Critical care." In first class, the scene was chaos. Kate was struggling to breathe, her chest rising and falling in shallow spasms. Her hands trembled. Lucas looked helpless, his face pale, one hand gripping his wife's arm, the other hovering as if afraid to touch her too much. A flight attendant intercepted Stella. "Are you sure you?" Stella cut her off. "Let me through. Now." Lucas looked up. For a second, he hesitated, then something in Stella's eyes made him step aside. "She's been having chest pain," Lucas said quickly. "It started an hour ago. She thought it was indigestion. Now she can't breathe. She's 8 months pregnant." Stella dropped to her knees next to Kate and began assessing her. Cool, clammy skin. Weak pulse. Rapid breathing. Distended neck veins. And then the clincher, a faint swelling in the left calf. It all fit. She looked up. "It's a pulmonary embolism." Lucas stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means there's likely a blood clot in her lung. We need to act fast." She turned to the flight crew. "Get oxygen. Tilt her to the left side. Elevate her legs. We need to reduce pressure on her vena cava. Keep her calm." The attendants scrambled. The first-class passengers sat frozen in silence. Stella's voice was the only steady thing in the cabin. She explained everything to Lucas as she worked. "She's going to be okay," Stella said, her voice low and firm. "But we need to keep her stable until we land." Lucas nodded, gripping his wife's hand. "Do whatever it takes." Stella placed the oxygen mask over Kate's face. "Just breathe, Kate. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You're okay. I've got you." Kate's eyes fluttered open for a moment. She looked at Stella, confused and afraid. "You're safe," Stella said. "You're not alone." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "We are making an emergency landing in Halifax. Medical services will be waiting on arrival." Stella didn't look up. She kept her eyes on Kate's pulse, counting seconds, watching her chest rise and fall. Lucas watched Stella the entire time, his expression slowly changing from panic to awe. She didn't look like much. Young. No lab coat. No authority. But here she was, calm in the eye of the storm, saving his wife and unborn child. She's stabilizing, Stella said. Her oxygen levels are improving. The tension in Lucas's shoulders released slightly. He let out a shaky breath. You're saving them. I'm doing what I was trained to do. The wheels touched the runway with a jolt that snapped the cabin into full awareness. The once steady hum of flight gave way to the urgent screech of tires and the mechanical growl of slowing engines. Outside the windows, the night was pierced by flashing red and white lights. Emergency crews were already in place. This was no ordinary landing. Inside, the cabin held its breath. Kate Fox was still lying across her seat in first class, her body tilted to the left, her breathing slow but steady under the oxygen mask. Her skin, once ghostly pale, now showed the faintest trace of color. Lucas sat beside her, one hand gripping hers, the other pressed against his lips as if in silent prayer. Stella Griffin stayed kneeling beside them, her knees stiff from the cramped floor, but her focus unshaken. She'd been monitoring Kate's pulse for the last 30 minutes, listening for any change, tracking every rise and fall of her chest like her own breath depended on it. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom. We've landed safely in Halifax. Emergency personnel will be boarding the aircraft momentarily. Moments later, the aircraft door cracked open, and a gust of cold air rushed in, sharp, biting, and real. 2 paramedics stepped inside, followed by a woman in a navy blue jacket bearing the crest of the local emergency response team. Where's the patient? She asked briskly. Here, Stella called, raising a hand. 3rd trimester pregnancy. Severe dyspnea mid-flight. Unilateral leg swelling. Suspected pulmonary embolism. Oxygen stabilized her, but she needs immediate imaging and anticoagulants. The paramedic closest to her blinked, impressed. You're the attending? Nurse, Stella replied without looking up. Critical care. Damn good job, the emergency physician muttered, moving in beside her. With practiced efficiency, the paramedics took Stella's place. A stretcher was brought in, and Lucas stood to the side, hands shaking as they lifted Kate gently onto it. She stirred weakly, her fingers reaching for Lucas, for reassurance. I'm right here, sweetheart, he said, bending to kiss her forehead. You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Stella stood back, rubbing her hands down her jeans as the weight of her role slipped off her shoulders. Her heart was still racing, her palms still damp, but her job, for now, was done. Lucas turned to her. The chaos of emergency was still unfolding around them, but in that instant, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. His mouth opened, then closed again. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. Thank you, he said, barely audible over the buzz of the aircraft. Stella nodded, her own throat too tight for words. She didn't need thanks. It wasn't about that. But there was something in Lucas's eyes that went beyond gratitude, something vulnerable and human, something that acknowledged the magnitude of what she had done. You saved them, he added. You saved my whole world. And with that, he followed the stretcher off the plane, disappearing into the swirl of lights and sirens. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a ripple moved through the cabin. Not applause, but a low murmur of awe. Passengers leaned toward one another, whispering. A few clapped softly. Others just watched Stella as she stood in the aisle, the quiet center of a storm that had now passed. That was incredible, someone said behind her. I didn't know she was a nurse, another murmured. Was that Lucas Fox? The billionaire. But none of it mattered to Stella. Not the recognition, not the whispers, not the fleeting attention. She felt none of it. She made her way back down the aisle toward her seat, her steps slow, her limbs heavy. Every inch of her body ached with exhaustion. As she passed through the rows, some passengers offered nods, a few touched her shoulder in quiet gratitude, but she kept her eyes ahead. She was just trying to breathe. Back at seat 27A, Stella collapsed into her chair. Her notebook was still where she left it, bent slightly at the corner, her ID badge clipped to the cover. She stared at it for a moment, then closed her eyes and leaned her head against the cold window. Outside, emergency vehicles glowed like beacons in the dark. After a few minutes, the cabin lights came on, and the disembarkation began. A flight attendant approached her quietly. You're clear to exit with the rest of the passengers. Authorities may want a brief statement, but that's all. Thanks, Stella said softly. You did something extraordinary, the attendant added. Stella gave her a tired smile. I did what I'm trained to do. She stood, gathered her bag, and joined the slow-moving line of passengers filing out into the terminal. As she walked, She felt the weight of everything she'd just carried begin to settle in her muscles. The pressure of minutes that had felt like lifetimes. The silence of a cabin waiting for permission to hope. In the terminal, bright fluorescent lights and polished tile floors reflected the sterile chill of 2 a.m. The world here was oblivious to what had just happened in the sky. Airport employees moved about, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded just a few yards away. Stella walked toward an empty row of seats near the windows and sat down heavily. The chill of the air conditioning hit her bones, and she hugged her coat tighter around herself. She didn't expect to see Lucas again. She didn't expect anything at all. She just wanted a moment to sit, to be no one, to feel the ground beneath her feet after keeping someone else alive in midair. A little boy toddled past her, dragging a small penguin on wheels. His mother trailed behind, juggling snacks and a diaper bag. The boy stopped and stared up at Stella. "You helped the lady," he said. Stella looked down at him. "I did. She was sick." "She's better now," Stella replied gently. The boy nodded solemnly, then followed his mother down the corridor, the penguin's wheels squeaking as they rolled away. Around her, the terminal began to fill with murmured conversations. People were reconnecting. Families reunited. Travelers updated their itineraries. The world was moving on. But Stella sat still, lost in the silence between emergencies. She reached into her bag, pulled out her notebook, and flipped to a fresh page. Mid-flight emergency. Third trimester PE. Signs: dyspnea, tachycardia, left leg swelling. Oxygen and left lateral tilt stabilized vitals. Emergency landing coordinated. Outcome: positive. She stared at the words. Not just a record. A moment. A life. Two, really. She had saved them. But she didn't feel powerful. She felt tired. Humbled. Human. She leaned back in her chair, eyes closing slowly. In the space between duty and stillness, she found a strange kind of peace. 3 days had passed since Stella Griffin returned to Texas, but everything felt different. The Texas sun hadn't changed. It still spilled over the sidewalks in thick, slow waves, warming up cracked pavement and worn porch steps. Cicadas still hummed lazily in the afternoon heat. Her small house, modest, with peeling white paint and a screen door that groaned every time it opened, still stood at the edge of a neighborhood most people drove through, not to. But something inside Stella had shifted. She was back at the small community clinic now. Not a big city hospital. No prestige. No cutting-edge trauma unit. Just 2 exam rooms, 1 overworked physician, and a nurse who made it work because people here couldn't afford for it not to. It was the place she'd chosen after nursing school, the place she came back to every time she could have left. Because this neighborhood was hers. The return to normal had been quick, as it always was in healthcare. She didn't talk about the flight. She hadn't told her coworkers that she'd saved a billionaire's wife and unborn child somewhere over the Atlantic. She hadn't told them about the emergency landing, or the ambulance, or the murmurs of recognition. She hadn't even told them about Lucas Fox. She thought about it, of course, in the quiet moments. At night. The feel of the aircraft floor under her knees. The sound of Lucas's voice when he said thank you, like he wasn't sure how. The weight of Kate's life, 2 lives in her hands. But here, in this world, there were still charts to file, patients to call, elderly neighbors to check on, and her mother to care for. Her mother, Ruth Griffin, sat on the porch most days now, wrapped in a worn sweater even in the warmth. The early stages of Parkinson's had set in last year. Stella kept her appointments, managed her meds, and helped her dress in the mornings when her hands were too shaky. It wasn't always easy. But Ruth had raised her alone, had given her everything. Caring for her wasn't a burden. It was a promise. That afternoon, the hum of cicadas was broken by the smooth roll of tires over gravel. Not the rumble of an old pickup or the staggered squeal of a rusted-out sedan like the neighbors drove. This was quieter, cleaner, sleek. Stella looked up from the porch steps, where she was sorting medical pamphlets for the clinic. At the curb, a black car pulled up, long, glossy, and tinted. For a moment, she thought maybe it had taken a wrong turn. Then the driver stepped out and opened the back door, and Lucas Fox emerged. He was dressed differently than before. Dark tailored pants, a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, but he still looked like the same man. Not the one from the news articles or Forbes lists, but the one who had cradled his wife's hand with shaking fingers and said thank you with tears in his eyes. In one hand, he held a bouquet of white lilies. In the other, a manila folder thick with paper. Stella stood up slowly, brushing off her jeans. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He walked toward her, across the yard that hadn't been mowed in 2 weeks, past the creaky porch swing, and stopped a few feet away. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. His voice was soft, careful, like he wasn't sure she'd let him stay. Stella crossed her arms loosely over her chest. "I didn't expect to see you again." He nodded. "I wasn't sure I'd come. I didn't want it to be performative. We're transactional." She said nothing. "I needed to say thank you again. Face to face. Without sirens or adrenaline." He stepped forward and handed her the flowers. "They're for your mother," he said. Stella hesitated, then took them. "She likes lilies." Lucas glanced at the porch window, where the curtain twitched slightly. Ruth was watching. Always was. "I asked around. Found you here," he added. "I didn't go public with what happened. That was your story to tell. But I couldn't ignore it, either." He held up the folder. "This is for you." Stella didn't take it. "What is it?" "An offer," he said. "Not payment. Not a reward. Just help. You asked for nothing. I want to give you something. I don't need anything." "I know," he said. "That's why you deserve it." A long silence stretched between them. The air buzzed with heat. "I could cover your student loans," Lucas said. "Pay for additional training, if you ever want to specialize. I could fund equipment for your clinic. Renovate it. Expand it." Stella's brow furrowed. "How do you know about my student loans?" Lucas paused, then answered calmly. "I had someone look into you. Just the basics. Public records. Your nursing school. Loan balance databases. Your job history. You live here with your mother. Her prescriptions show up in state health registries, Parkinson's meds. I put the rest together." She stared at him, startled, not at the invasion, but at how precise, how gentle his answer was. He wasn't ashamed of checking, but he wasn't proud of it either. It was just what someone did when they wanted to help and didn't know where to begin. "I wasn't trying to dig," he added. "I just wanted to understand the person who saved my family." She looked down at the flowers in her hands, then at the man in front of her. "I didn't help your wife to be thanked, Mr. Fox. I did it because I'm a nurse, and because someone needed help." "I know that," he said, "and I don't think I've ever met someone who meant it more." He offered her the folder again. Slowly, Stella reached for it. "I don't want anything for me," she said carefully. "But there are people here who haven't seen a doctor in years. People who work 3 jobs and still can't afford a prescription. People who sit in that clinic waiting room with untreated diabetes and heart failure and God knows what else because they've been invisible their whole lives." Lucas didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "My mother," Stella added, her voice softer now. "She can't work anymore. She won't say it, but the tremors scare her. And I've been making it work. Barely. But sometimes, barely isn't enough." Her throat tightened. She hadn't meant to say that much. But something about his presence, his quiet honesty, made it impossible to hold back. Lucas stepped forward, more gently this time. "Then let me help," he said. "Let me help them. And her. I have the resources. But I need someone who knows where they're needed. Someone who already does the work." Stella looked down at the folder again, then opened it. Inside was a draft proposal. A fund for community health outreach. Clinic upgrades. Medication subsidies. Transportation grants for patients in rural counties. And a personal grant, unrestricted, if she chose to accept it. She looked back up at him, her eyes slightly wide. "This is real." Lucas nodded once. "Completely." She exhaled. A long, slow breath that had been building in her chest for years. "Then that's what I want. Not money. Not some nameplate scholarship in my honor. I want care. For her. For them. For this whole forgotten zip code. Then that's what we'll do." There was no handshake. No dramatic embrace. Just quiet agreement. Stella stepped back toward the porch, flowers in hand, folder tucked under her arm. "Would you like some sweet tea?" she asked. Lucas blinked, then smiled. "I'd love that." And for the first time in days, Stella smiled back. The sun rose slowly over Eastwood, casting soft amber light across the tops of rusted mailboxes and worn porches. The morning was unusually still. The kind of stillness that hangs before something new begins. At the corner of a once-abandoned lot, where weeds used to creep up through broken asphalt and old tires were left to rot, a new building now stood. Simple but proud. Wide windows let in the early light. A fresh coat of white paint gleamed beneath the sky. Its brick base, painted warm red, sat strong against the ground, rooted like it had always belonged there. Above the front doors hung a sign. Texas Health Initiative, a community wellness center. The ribbon fluttered gently in the breeze, stretched tight between two pillars. Red, white, and gold. Nothing fancy, but symbolic, just the same. Cars pulled in, neighbors stepping out in their Sunday best, even though it was a Thursday. Some walked, hand in hand. Some pushed wheelchairs. Others came with children climbing out of minivans, dressed in clothes just slightly too big, the way kids always were. News vans lined the edge of the lot. Reporters tested microphones. Camera crews framed their shots. But their presence was secondary. This wasn't a media event. It was a people event. And in the middle of it all stood Stella Griffin. She wore a simple dark green dress and white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back, her hands folded in front of her, fingers brushing the edge of the clipboard she still couldn't stop carrying, just in case someone needed her to do something. A volunteer approached her with a clipboard of her own. "We're ready when you are," the woman said. She wore a shirt that read, "We built this together." Stella gave a small nod. Her throat was tight. Her heart was loud in her chest. Lucas Fox stood beside her, dressed in a gray button-up shirt and slacks. No tie, no speech cards, just a smile that had weathered its own kind of journey. The billionaire real estate mogul was unmistakable now, and yet no one here seemed to treat him like anything other than a man who'd shown up, kept his promise, and put his money where his silence used to be. He turned to her. "Ready?" Stella looked around, at the kids chasing each other near the food trucks, at the elderly woman from down the block holding a bouquet of wildflowers, at the nurse from the old clinic wiping tears as she stared at the new entrance. And then she looked over at her mother. Ruth stood among the crowd in a navy shawl and a white blouse. Her posture was straighter than it had been in years. The tremors in her hands were softer now, managed by medication Stella used to ration between bills. Her smile was soft, proud, private. "I guess I'm ready," Stella whispered. Lucas gave a knowing nod and stepped up to the microphone. The cameras adjusted their angles. The crowd quieted. "Good morning," he began. "For those who don't know me, my name is Lucas Fox. I'm not from this community. I didn't build it, but I've come to admire it. And today, I want to speak briefly about why this building behind me exists." He paused, glanced to his right. "This is Stella Griffin, a nurse, a daughter, a neighbor, a force." The crowd chuckled softly. Lucas continued. "Months ago, I sat on a plane, watching the most important person in my life, my pregnant wife, struggle to breathe. And everyone froze. Everyone but Stella. She didn't hesitate. She didn't wait for permission. She just acted." His voice wavered slightly. "She saved my family that day. But what stayed with me most wasn't what she did for us. It was what she asked for afterward. When I tried to repay her, she didn't ask for a job or money. She asked me to help her mother. And to help you. The people she serves every day. The people often left out of boardrooms and balance sheets and blueprints." He turned toward the building. "This center exists because she told me the truth. That there are thousands of communities just like this one, filled with people who work hard, love harder, and suffer quietly because no one listens. Well, today, we're listening." Applause swelled. Not wild, not performative. Rooted. The kind that rises up from the chest. Lucas smiled and stepped back. He didn't linger in the spotlight. He turned to Stella and offered her the oversized scissors. She blinked at them. "I wasn't supposed to speak," she murmured. Lucas leaned closer. "You don't have to. Just cut the ribbon." She stepped forward. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze again, and she gripped the handles, raised them slowly, and then paused. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes catching on each face she knew. Miss Trujillo, who came into the clinic for asthma meds. Marcus, the kid who once split his chin skateboarding. 2 pregnant teenagers she'd walked through prenatal care and heartbreak. She caught her mother's eyes. And then she cut the ribbon. The sound of fabric parting was barely audible over the applause, but it felt like a thunderclap in her chest. Like a door opening. Like a weight she'd carried alone for years had suddenly been lifted and carried by others. The crowd surged forward as volunteers opened the doors. Inside, the center smelled of new paint and possibility. Wide hallways. Bright walls. Rooms fully stocked. Exam tables that weren't secondhand. An intake desk with software that worked. A refrigerated room for insulin and vaccines. A break room with fresh coffee. A counseling office with a couch that didn't sag. Everywhere she turned, people smiled not because of her title, but because they belonged here. It wasn't charity. It wasn't a favor. It was their right, and this space was proof that someone believed in that right enough to build it. The media crews tried to follow her, cameras clicking. Ms. Griffin. Stella, can you comment on it? She ducked her head politely, slipping past them. She wasn't here for a soundbite. In a side hallway, out of view, she paused. She leaned against the cool wall and closed her eyes. Her student loans were gone now, cleared quietly by Lucas's team in a transaction she hadn't even known was completed until her loan servicer emailed her a zero balance. Her salary was still modest. That was by design. She didn't want to be lifted above the community. She wanted to remain in it. Every dollar that didn't go to her went back into the Health Initiative's expansion fund. Mobile clinics, outreach teams, bilingual health educators. What filled her now wasn't pride. It wasn't accomplishment. It was something quieter, deeper, satisfaction. This was the thing she had always wanted to do. She had just never imagined she'd get the resources to do it right. Back in the lobby, a little girl in a bright pink dress ran up to her, handed her a crayon drawing of the building with "Thank you, Nurse Stella" written in uneven block letters. Stella crouched down and smiled. "Did you draw this?" The girl nodded shyly. "It's beautiful," Stella said. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket like it was worth more than any certificate. Lucas passed through the hallway on his way out, his phone buzzing in his hand. He paused when he saw her. "You okay?" Stella smiled. "Yeah, just taking it in." He nodded, reading her silence correctly. "You don't need to say anything. I know. But if you ever wanna," she shook her head gently. "They're saying it for me." Lucas smiled and left her there, leaning against the wall beneath a framed sign that read, "Dignity, access, community, care." And that was enough. The afternoon light fell gently across the parking lot, long golden beams spilling over the sidewalk like spilled paint. The Texas heat had mellowed into something tender by now, a warmth that wrapped itself around the modest clinic building like a protective hand. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic, paper charts, and something sweet from the volunteer-run snack table. It was just after lunch, and the Texas Health Initiative Clinic was alive with quiet purpose. Children on booster seats waiting for checkups, elderly patients being helped through forms, nurses moving efficiently through hallways designed not to intimidate but to invite. Stella Griffin moved through the corridor with practiced ease, her sneakers squeaking softly on the polished floor. A stethoscope hung loosely around her neck. Her badge still read Nurse Supervisor, but most people just called her Stella. She liked it that way. Titles didn't mean much here. What mattered were the conversations, the consistency, the trust built day after day between a community and the ones caring for it. She paused by a room, peered in gently, offered a reassuring smile to a teenage mother holding an infant while a nurse measured vitals. Then she moved on. She had become something of a fixture now, always walking the halls, always present. Not because she had to be, but because she believed showing up was half the job. People didn't trust systems. They trusted faces. And she wanted to be a face that reminded people they weren't alone. When she rounded the corner toward the main lobby, she saw a couple standing just beyond the check-in desk. Lucas and Kate Fox. Stella stopped without realizing it. Kate's auburn hair caught the afternoon light like flame. She looked healthier, stronger, radiant in the way only a mother freshly healed and wholly grounded can. In her arms, she carried a newborn, swaddled in pale green. The baby was small but alert, eyes darting softly between light and shadow. Lucas stood at her side, a diaper bag casually slung over one shoulder. He looked different too, relaxed, lighter, as if the invisible weight he'd once carried so tightly across his shoulders had finally been set down somewhere safe. It took them both a second to notice her. Then Kate looked up, and their eyes met. There was no gasp, no emotional outburst, no grand cinematic reunion. Just a moment. Still, soft, deep. Kate's lips curved into a gentle smile. She adjusted the baby slightly, as if presenting a quiet miracle. Stella walked toward them slowly, her breath catching with a strange mix of surprise and recognition. Kate was the first to speak, her voice a whisper despite the absence of noise. "Hi." "Hi," Stella said. They stood there, facing each other, with a kind of reverence that didn't need explanation. The memory of the plane. Of oxygen masks and racing pulses, of barely their breathing and whispered reassurances, hung between them. But it wasn't painful anymore. It was sacred. "This is Ava," Kate said, looking down at her daughter. Stella leaned in slightly. The baby blinked up at her. Soft lashes, steady breath, impossibly small fingers. "She's perfect," Stella murmured. "She's here because of you." Stella shook her head, almost on instinct. "She's here because of all of us. You held on." Lucas kept her calm. "The EMTs. The doctors. It took all of us." Kate nodded. "Maybe, but you were the first." Stella didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. Lucas stepped forward, offering a warm, knowing smile. "Thought it was time we finally visited," he said. "We've seen the press, the articles, the photos, but we wanted to see the real thing." Stella gestured around modestly. "It's not much. It's everything," Lucas said. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the lobby. A boy played with a plastic truck in the waiting area, while his grandmother filled out a form in Spanish. A teenage girl in scrubs helped an elderly man adjust his walker. 2 volunteers set out boxes of diapers in the resource corner. Lucas watched in silence. "I didn't know a place like this could feel so peaceful." "It took a lot of noise to build it," Stella said with a smile. "But yeah, it's quiet now. The good kind of quiet." They moved to the side of the lobby, near a cushioned bench under a bulletin board labeled "Health is Home." Kate sat first, carefully settling in with Ava still cradled against her chest. Lucas eased down beside her. Stella remained standing for a moment, then took a seat across from them, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. She watched Kate for a moment, her soft movements, her instinctive glances at the baby every few seconds. There was no drama in it, no fear. Just the rhythm of motherhood that Stella had helped make possible. "I didn't think I'd feel normal again after the flight," Kate said quietly. "I couldn't stop reliving it for weeks. But then Ava was born, and it's like the memory softened." Stella nodded. "It usually does." Lucas glanced around the room again, watching a young woman in a hijab help her father to the exam area. "These people," he said, "they're getting care now. Real care. Probably for the first time in years." Stella followed his gaze. "Some of them walked here. Some take the shuttle. One guy bikes 2 hours every other week to pick up meds for his brother. They show up because they know they matter now. That's what this place is." Lucas looked back at her, his expression quiet and full. "You changed our lives." Stella didn't hesitate. She smiled, shook her head softly, and replied, "You helped me change theirs." He didn't argue. He didn't need to, because in that moment, the truth was clear. Etched into every corner of the building, every patient's face, every small act of healing happening quietly all around them. They sat like that for a while, 3 adults and a newborn in a clinic lobby, as the hum of community care moved on around them. Outside, the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The front windows caught the light just right, and for a few seconds, the glass glowed gold. The clinic sign outside, "Texas Health Initiative," reflected back across the floor in soft light. Stella watched them go, then turned back to the hallway. A few patients were being escorted into their rooms. An elderly man was chatting softly with a nurse, laughing at something she said. A little girl in mismatched socks held her mother's hand tightly as they made their way toward the pediatrics wing. Stella walked slowly. The weight of the moment stayed with her, not heavy, just present. She passed the wall where handprints from the clinic's opening day were still proudly displayed, each one labeled with names: patients, volunteers, doctors, local kids. Somewhere near the bottom, written in faded marker, "Ava, coming soon." Kate had mailed it months earlier. A tiny ink print of the baby's foot pressed onto a card with the words, "She already belongs here." Stella paused at the wall, brushing her fingers lightly over the name. "Full circle," she whispered. She made her way to her office, a small glass-walled room tucked behind the intake area. Inside, the space was clean, simple, just how she liked it. A corkboard filled with sticky notes and thank you cards from patients. Her desk, modest but covered in files, to-do lists, and a few pieces of art from local school kids. One particularly crooked drawing showed her with a massive stethoscope and a smile the size of Texas. She sank into her chair and allowed herself to breathe, just for a minute. A knock on the door. Lucas. He stood there, now without Kate and the baby. He held 2 cups of coffee, one of which he extended to her. "I wasn't sure how you'd take it, so I guessed," he said. Stella accepted it with a small laugh. "You guessed right." He leaned against the doorframe. She didn't want to leave without seeing the mural again. Said she remembers standing here while it was going up. Before Ava came. She still gets emotional about it. Stella smiled. It makes sense. That wall has stories in it. Lucas looked around the office slowly. I see why you stayed. She followed his gaze. It's not the biggest building, she said. It doesn't have a surgical wing or a fancy research center. But it has soul. And it has trust. That's rare. Lucas nodded slowly. You know. I used to think change came from big gestures. A press release. A massive donation. A new tower in a city skyline. And now I think change might just start in rooms like this. With conversations like this. Stella sipped her coffee and looked at him. It's both. It's big moves and small ones. Ava didn't get here because of one miracle. She got here because all the small things worked together. The timing, the crew, the flight diversion, the EMTs, the hospital, and before that, Kate deciding to fly. You sitting beside her. He smiled. And you stepping up. She didn't respond. Not because she disagreed, but because she'd never wanted it to be about her. I think you've helped more people than you'll ever know, he said. I hope I never know, she replied softly. Because that means they're okay. That they don't need to come back scared. Lucas finished his coffee and stood straighter. We're going to fund 2 more branches, by the way. San Antonio and Tyler. Same model. Different teams. But you started it. Stella looked at him, stunned. Are you serious? Very. She blinked. That's incredible. You said it wasn't about the building, Lucas said. It was about access. So now it's spreading. Stella stood, emotion rising in her chest again. Thank you. No, Lucas said quietly but firmly. Thank you. They didn't hug. That wasn't them. But when he stepped out of her office, something lingered in the air, a kind of gravity between people who had once met on the edge of something terrifying and survived together. Later that evening, when the last patient had gone and the waiting room was still, Stella walked through the now empty lobby. The light from the setting sun painted warm stripes across the floor, golden ribbons stretching toward the clinic's front windows. She stepped outside and stood beneath the clinic's sign. The parking lot was nearly empty. The air smelled of cooling earth and distant barbecue from a neighbor's grill. She looked up at the lettering. Texas Health Initiative Dignity. Access. Community. Care. Then she looked out over the block, houses and shops and schools and people. And she allowed herself, finally, to feel it. Not pride. Peace. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story of Stella, Lucas, Kate, and baby Ava, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What moved you the most, and how did you feel about how everything ended? Drop your comments below and tell us where you're watching from. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Whether it was Stella's courage, Lucas's humility, or the moment Kate introduced Ava at the clinic, your voice matters. Join the conversation and let us know what this story meant to you.